One of the things I find most curious about Eiichiro Oda's writing is the way that he plays with established themes. If you are somewhat familiar with One Piece, you will know that there are many elements in the story that Oda borrows from outside sources, and that often follow certain patterns. Some of these themes serve as an underlying message, while others are simply a method of consistent storytelling. Most stories make use of this principle, and that inevitably leads to a general exhaustion of many of these themes in contemporary works. Especially in fiction, we often find the same ideas and elements recycled over and over again. What Oda does differently here is that he integrates these widely spread ideas and takes them a step further. Some of them he gives a twist, while others he explores in a different context. A perfect example of this method of writing is Sanji. Being one of the major figures in the series, Sanji unites a whole bunch of ideas inside of his character. And following it can sometimes feel like it's full of contradictions. In this video, we will explore how Oda constructed Sanji to be a true gentleman, and how he subtly twists the stereotype in certain ways to turn Sanji into a fascinating character that finds itself conflicted with its ideals and values. In this context, we will also take a closer look at the true purpose of the Whole Cake Island arc, and discuss why our passionate cook is such an important part of the Straw Hat crew. Before we can decide though if Sanji truly is a gentleman in every sense of the word, we must first understand what being a gentleman actually means. The term gentleman nowadays is often confused for individual, superficial acts of politeness. You sometimes hear guys being called a gentleman for basically not behaving like an asshole. But being a gentleman has nothing to do with holding open the door for a woman, nor with being a man. It is much rather determined by a person's overall behavior and mindset. Becoming a gentleman is something that takes a strong conviction, as well as a lot of time and effort. There are a whole bunch of qualities that make a true gentleman. These include chivalry, compassion and kindness, respect, bravery, loyalty, and cleverness. Being a gentleman, therefore, means being respectful and tolerant in interaction with others, while putting their interests before your own. But why would anyone want to go through all that in the first place, though? There are several reasons why it might be worth to strive for becoming a gentleman. Obviously, it comes with a certain amount of altruism and finding pleasure in helping others. This can mean helping and protecting those who are in need or important to you, bringing positivity and kindness into someone's life, or simply inspiring others to follow your example for creating a more social and positive environment. But of course, it also holds benefit for you personally. Behaving in a gentlemanlike manner towards others will earn you the respect and trust of those around you. This again will in the end inspire more positive behavior back towards yourself as well, creating a kind of positive feedback loop for everyone involved. And if you spin this thought even further and look at it from a cultural perspective, encouraging such behavior may in the end result in a more considerate and healthy society, one that actively seeks to be helpful. Helpful in a genuine, open and kind way, and not in a patronizing or superior way. In other words, a gentleman, and that can be anyone, is someone that unites a broad variety of positive characteristics that benefit those around them. On the other hand, what you probably are also aware of though is the fact that characters who are through and through good are usually not the ones we love and root for the most in a story. And we will later on also explore what problems such a white knight can bring with it in the context of storytelling. Since people in the real world are not that black or white, we tend to prefer characters that are morally a little bit more grey. So now let's take a look whether Sanji actually fulfills the requirements to be called a true gentleman, what implications that has for his character, and why he's so essential to the story. As a quick disclaimer at this point, if you aren't caught up with the story of One Piece yet, be careful, because from now on this video will contain spoilers for Sanji's character arc. Being part of the monster trio and one of the early members of the crew, Sanji is one of the most beloved characters in the story. While his considerable fighting abilities, as well as his cool and collected manner, play a big part in this, Sanji's character has a high level of complexity, and therefore has a lot more to offer. Over the years we have gotten to know Sanji better and better, and with the events at Whole Cake Island we now finally have a very full picture of why Sanji became the person he is today. So now let's look at the 5 defining character traits for Sanji and how they qualify him to be the true gentleman of the story. The first trait that we will look at is Sanji's cleverness. While inside the monster trio, he might not be considered quite as powerful as Luffy or Zoro by some, he often makes up for it by fighting smarter. Sanji often finds himself wandering off alone during large encounters, only to discover secret doors and weaknesses that he's able to exploit for the crew's benefit. His curiosity and cleverness often put him into situations where he's able to save the rest of the crew. Sanji does so on the way to Alabasta, posing as Mr. 3 and giving the crew a decisive edge against Crocodile, as he's unknown to the Baroque Works organization. Later on, when the rest of the crew was captured on Alabasta, Sanji outwitted him again, using a Denden Mushi. He then repeats this feat in Skypiea to wreak havoc on Annel's ship from the inside. And when Robin was captured by the CP9 at Water 7, Sanji already figured they would take her to the station and waited for them there. And later on Enies Lobby, he went off on his own in order to close the gates of justice, much rather than engaging with the guards on the island. In Punk Hazard, he left the group in order to save Tashigi from Virgo. But the most significant case would most likely be having to leave Zou to spare his crew from Big Mom's wrath by going and confronting his family. All these examples show how Sanji uses his cleverness in critical situations to turn the table for his crewmates. But we also get to see Sanji's cleverness outside of battle. He's usually very perceptive of things and seems to have a good judgment when it comes to critical situations. Being clever is essential to being a true gentleman, because understanding situations and people and knowing how to act appropriately is an important trait in order to have a positive influence. The second important characteristic is Sanji's deep sense of compassion and kindness. Sanji might be one of the kindest and most empathetic characters in all of One Piece. While we usually see Sanji carrying himself in a very calm, cool and collected manner, he's not someone to be afraid of showing emotion and weakness from time to time. As a matter of fact, we have seen many characters admiring Sanji's kind heart, including his mother, his sister, Luffy and even Brook, who stated, "Sanji is just too kind. Once he decides to protect someone, he will put his life on the line for them." Despite growing up under the terror of his father and his brothers, Sanji always kept his strong sense of compassion and generosity. After he was taken in by Zeph, these attributes were imbued deep into his personality and define a lot of Sanji's decisions and actions throughout the story. Next to the people closest to him that he would go to any length to in order to save them or make them happy, he also cares for strangers. This can be seen on various occasions, when Sanji goes out of his way to save Gin at the Baratier, Kinemon and Tashigi on Punk Hazard, the Minks on Zou, as well as Chiffon from Oven's Wrath on Whole Cake Island. He even refused to leave his family behind that caused him so much agony and pain in his childhood, and that had made use of him to get close to Big Mom. And he also protected Pudding at the wedding ceremony despite being aware of her true intentions. As you can see, Sanji cares for friends and foes alike when a situation calls for empathy and compassion. But his kindness probably is most pronounced in his rule to never let anyone go hungry, no matter who they might be. After having experienced true hunger himself, he swore to himself to not let anyone go through that if he can help it. His desire to help and protect others is a central part of being a gentleman, and Sanji lives by this ideal without a second thought. The third personality trait that is defining for Sanji's character are loyalty and respect. Similar to Zoro, Sanji also strongly believes in loyalty. Not only would Sanji do anything for those he loves, but he also sided with Zoro about Usopp rejoining the crew when the latter stepped on Luffy's pride. It was therefore so much worse for him when he was the one to betray Luffy and the crew later on Zou. Obviously, it was a hard blow to his self-esteem when he was faced with the choice between leaving the crew or the life of his matter-of-fact father Zeph. The internal conflict that this decision has engulfed Sanji in resulted in a lot of pain for everyone involved. Sanji even claimed that he had lost the right to return to the crew until Luffy convinced him otherwise. This already shows us one of the problems with Sanji's strong ideals, but we will get back to that in a little bit. Hand in hand with Sanji's loyalty goes a strong sense of respect. This obviously includes respect for Zeph, his captain and crewmates, but also sometimes respect for certain enemies. And of course, Sanji requires respect from anyone when it comes to food and women. We can see the full extent of this respect and loyalty on Thriller Bark, when he tries to sacrifice himself for his captain before Zoro steps in and knocks him out in order to take on that responsibility himself. Loyal and respectful behavior are more than necessary features to be considered a true gentleman after all. The next critical trait for Sanji are his bravery and combat attitude. Without a doubt, we know that Sanji is strong. While there's always a lot of debate going on over how everyone ranks in the crew strength-wise, I think no one will disagree that Sanji is one of the most important combatants on the crew. Usually being fearless in battle, he's often seen fighting armies and powerful opponents with barely more than a concerned look. And being part of the monster trio, he usually ends up fighting one of the stronger opponents in an arc. Despite having significant battle skills though, different from Luffy or Zoro, he usually tries to avoid a direct confrontation whenever possible. And while we definitely see him enjoying a battle at times, Sanji usually only enters a fight to protect or help someone else. On Thriller Bark, for example, he fights Absalom in order to protect Nami, and just recently in Wano, he immediately jumped in to protect Toko from Shogun Orochi's attempt to kill her, standing side by side with Zoro. Having the wish and the ability to fight for and protect others are very important assets for any gentleman. Lastly, we have to take a closer look at Sanji's chivalry, which is in general an essential part of being a gentleman, but has two very different sides in Sanji's case. In some cases, Sanji can be seen acting mature and cool around women, further supporting his image as a gentleman. In other cases though, it can get very excessive and pervy. Some people think that his perverted nature is taken too far, and often crosses the line of being comedic and sometimes even too downright creepy. And while I don't disagree with that, it's something that in a manga you maybe have to accept as a quirk to the character. I personally don't think that Sanji should lose this side of him completely, but I think it would allow more people to see him as a great character if it were to be turned down a little bit. That being said, over the course of the story, this has somewhat improved, especially by giving Sanji some real experiences with women, like Viola or Pudding, that have helped him mature a little bit in this regard. This excessive behavior aside though, Sanji in general has a very respectful and chivalrous attitude towards women. This even goes so far that next to feeding anyone who's hungry, Sanji's second big rule in life is not to hurt or fight any woman. This attitude most likely developed under the influence of his sister Reiju, who was the only positive influence in his childhood, as well as Zeph, who held strong ideals by himself. As a result, he becomes infuriated with anyone going against this ideal. This can, for example, be seen inside the Germa's castle. When he found Cosette brutally beaten to the point of unconsciousness, Sanji became absolutely furious. He went on to find Niji and ended up breaking his jaw, all that despite the threats and warnings his family issued towards him. All these qualities, his cleverness, his compassion, his kindness, his loyalty and respect, his bravery as well as his chivalry, make Sanji into a true gentleman, someone that the people around him can truly rely on. What then is the problem with this codex that Sanji follows, and how did it affect his character not only story-wise but also in the eyes of many fans? Like all the other Straw Hats, Sanji also follows a dream for which he joined Luffy on his journey, finding the legendary All Blue, a sea where fish from all over the world are gathered together. What makes this dream so much different from all the other Straw Hats though is that this is not really a dream that you can truly make any tangible progress towards over the course of the journey. Finding a place is different from becoming stronger or better at what you do, and we also pretty much never see Sanji making any active efforts to find out more about his dream. So in other words, his development over the story is usually more for other people than for himself. Sanji doesn't have the motivation to become stronger just for the sake of it. His goal is completely unrelated to his character. What Sanji strives for much rather is to uphold his ideals and be a true gentleman, a knight on a white horse. While this in its own way is also a very difficult and noble task, in a story like One Piece that not only is focused around personal growth, but also is incredibly long, it can be difficult to cheer for a character that strives for staying the same, rather than changing. We enjoy seeing Luffy training to get new skills and Zoro learning new techniques. What is easy to overlook though is Sanji's struggle with his morality and values. Having a list of rules to live by, some might argue that this works against the character. If he never breaks that rule, then how can there be conflict? How can that character not seem static and boring? But in my opinion, that is simply not true. Sanji's actual curse is that he's always compared to Zoro and Luffy, since he has comparable fighting power. There is the strong expectation for him to similarly strive for more strength, but I think it's important to realize that Sanji's personality and character arc are just extremely different from these two. One Piece is after all not only a story about characters being changed by the world, but it's also in many ways a story about the world being changed by the characters. Sanji again and again comes into conflict with his ideals. His conviction to not fight women under any circumstances often hinders him from helping and protecting those around him. This can, for example, be seen in his fight against Khalifa from CP9 during the Enies Lobby arc. And the conflict between his loyalty towards Zeph and his loyalty towards his crew end up in the Whole Cake Island arc, which purpose has been deeply misunderstood exactly for the same reason. People thought that the arc was all about Sanji getting stronger and catching up to Luffy and Zoro, and there was a lot of disappointment when that didn't happen. But as we just saw, that's not what this character is actually about. Whole Cake Island was Sanji's arc because his ideals that he strives to keep up finally pushed him into a moral corner, where he had no choice but to change. He had to experience the problems and pain that sticking to his ideals could mean, and he had to learn and accept to trust his captain and his crew in order to be able to keep them alive in the future. In other words, Sanji had to grow as a character to stay loyal to his values. So the next time you read the Whole Cake Island arc, I ask you to keep that in mind and try to look at the events from that perspective. You will see that the entire arc gets an entirely new gravity for Sanji's character when you stop looking at him the same way you would look at Zoro or Luffy. Sanji is a fascinating character because his personality and his combat skills make his character seem inconsistent and contradictory at times. But it's important to realize how great it is for the Straw Hat crew to have someone as kind and compassionate as Sanji on the crew that also has the power to act upon it. So despite being close to Luffy and Zoro in terms of combat ability, his character arc is very different and unique inside the crew. Being a true gentleman brings many challenges and hardships with it, but it also makes Sanji so incredibly important for the crew and the entire story. Plus, he can cook. What else could anyone ask for? Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. I feel like there often is a lot of competition between Sanji and Zoro fans, but I personally think that there's no issue in loving both characters for different reasons. Yes, both can fight, but apart from that, both of them have amazingly complex and interesting personalities and ideals. And I think that both will be equally important to help Luffy and the crew reach their goals in the future. What are your thoughts on his character though? And what other defining moments can you think of? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Starting this week, you can also support me and my work on Patreon. If you're interested in helping me make more embedded videos, you can find the link to my page in the description below. You will get free access to all of my artwork and early access to my major videos. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to be notified for any future content of mine. Or dislike, don't share and unsubscribe. It's a free world, people. I hope to see you around next time, and until then, have a great week. Oh yeah, and don't forget to turn your notifications on, cause YouTube can sometimes be forgetful. Bye!